But they were reasonably mature things that even today stand up pretty well.
The Twilight Zone remains one of the most unforgettable shows in television history. But hidden inside one episode is a scene so disturbing and so historically explosive that CBS quietly locked it away for over 50 years. Behind the eerie music and Rod Serling's calm narration were angry sponsors, secret production disasters, visible mistakes the producers prayed nobody would notice, and a story so controversial that even one of the stars later regretted being part of it. Once you see the scene they tried to bury, you will finally understand the disaster they created. The birth of the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling was one of the most respected television writers of his generation, but respect did not protect him from the censors. Every time he tried to write about racism, war, or political corruption, the network executives and corporate sponsors found reasons to cut his lines, change his endings, or kill his projects entirely. He grew tired of fighting battles he could not win, so he invented a new way to fight. He would hide his most controversial ideas inside science fiction stories, where monsters and aliens and mysterious visitors from another dimension could say things that human characters were not allowed to say. The result was The Twilight Zone, a show that changed television forever. But behind the scenes, the production was plagued by secrets, accidents, and footage that the producers tried very hard to make sure the audience never saw. Rod Serling pitched The Twilight Zone as a way to break free from the corporate censorship that had plagued his previous live television dramas. He had written serious, socially conscious plays for shows like Playhouse 90 and Kraft Television Theater, and he had won Emmy Awards for his trouble. But the awards did not give him creative freedom. Every script he submitted had to be approved by network executives who were terrified of offending sponsors, and every sponsor was terrified of offending viewers. Serling realized that the only way to write about controversial subjects without triggering the censors was to disguise those subjects as something else. If he wrote a story about racism, the network would kill it. If he wrote a story about an astronaut who hated aliens because they looked different, the network would call it science fiction and let it pass. To produce the show, Serling founded a company called Cayuga Productions, which he named after Cayuga Lake in New York. The name was personal, a small piece of his private life attached to a project that would consume his public one. Cayuga Productions gave Serling the independence he needed to develop The Twilight Zone, without constant interference from studio executives who did not understand what he was trying to do. The company was small, the budget was tight, and the future was uncertain. But Serling had a vision, and he was willing to fight for it. The initial pilot concept for the show was titled The Time Element, and it was written in 1958 as a potential episode of a different anthology series. CBS executives read the script and shelved it immediately, convinced that it was too strange for American audiences. But another producer named Burt Grainer saw something in the script that the CBS executives had missed. He arranged for The Time Element to air on a different program, Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse, and the response from viewers was overwhelming. The network received a large wave of fan mail from people who wanted to see more stories like this one. That response helped convince CBS to move ahead with The Twilight Zone, and Serling finally got the green light he had been waiting for. The casting strategy for the show was unusual. The Twilight Zone deliberately avoided hiring top-tier Hollywood movie stars, partly because the budget could not afford them, and partly because Serling wanted audiences to focus on the stories rather than the faces. Instead, the show operated as an incubator for up-and-coming talent and veteran character actors who could be counted on to deliver strong performances without demanding star treatment. Over the course of the series, The Twilight Zone served as an early career launchpad for actors who would later become cultural icons. William Shatner appeared in an episode called Nick of Time, years before he captained the Starship Enterprise. Robert Redford appeared in Nothing in the Dark before he became a Sundance legend. Burt Reynolds appeared in The Bard before he grew his mustache and became a box office champion. Robert Duvall appeared in Miniature before he established himself as one of the finest actors of his generation. The list of future stars who passed through the Twilight Zone is astonishing, and it speaks to the quality of the material that drew talented actors even when the pay was low. Rod Serling never intended to be the on-screen host or narrator of his own show. He was a writer, not a performer, and he had no desire to become a television personality. The production team initially approached legendary actor Orson Welles to record the narration, hoping that his voice would give the show the gravity it needed. Welles turned them down, and other choices proved too expensive for the show's modest budget. With no other options left, Serling stepped in front of the camera himself, reluctantly accepting the role that would define his public image for the rest of his life. His distinct, clipped delivery, the way he paused between phrases and leaned into certain words, became the definitive signature of the series. Generations of viewers who cannot name a single episode can still imitate the way Serling said, "Submitted for your approval." The vast majority of the series was filmed on the iconic Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer backlot in Culver City, California. The show frequently recycled massive standing sets from classic MGM movies, a cost-saving measure that Serling turned into a creative advantage. The futuristic city streets and the small-town squares were the exact same sets that had been built for big-budget MGM features. The reuse was not always seamless, but it gave the show a distinctive visual texture that cheaply built sets could not replicate. Because computer-generated imagery did not exist in the late 1950s and early 60s, the series relied heavily on practical in-camera optical illusions managed by director of photography George T. Clemens. Clemens used forced perspective to make ordinary rooms look impossibly large or small. He used split-screen glass matte paintings to create backgrounds that did not exist. He used reverse motion filming to make objects appear to move backwards, or people appear to defy gravity. Every supernatural phenomenon that appeared on screen was created live on celluloid without relying on expensive post-production laboratory opticals. The work was painstaking, the margin for error was small, and the results were often stunning. Over its original 5-season run from 1959 to 1964, the series produced 156 episodes and secured its legacy through major industry accolades. Rod Serling personally won Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Writing Achievement in Drama in 1960 and 1961. George T. Clemens won a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Cinematography in 1961. The show also dominated the science fiction community, winning the prestigious Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation 3 consecutive times in 1960, 1961, and 1962. But behind the polished episodes and the glowing awards, the production of The Twilight Zone was marked by conflicts that the public never saw. The battles between Serling and the censors did not end when the show went into production. The fights over scripts, the compromises forced by sponsors, and the pressure to deliver episodes on impossible schedules created an environment where accidents were inevitable. The dark side of The Twilight Zone. During the late 1950s and early 60s, corporate sponsors had a huge amount of control over what was included in television scripts. For modern viewers used to streaming services and commercial-free shows, that level of influence can be hard to imagine. The companies that paid for the airtime had the power to demand changes to dialogue, characters, and even entire plot lines if they believed that something in the episode might reflect poorly on their products or offend their customers. Serling who had spent years fighting this system, found himself trapped inside it once again. He could hide social commentary inside science fiction stories, but he could not hide from the sponsor's notes that arrived with every new script. During the production of an episode called Judgment Night, which was about the haunted journey of a German U-boat captain forced to relive his wartime sins, a corporate sponsor that supplied food products to American households forced producers to remove a single line of dialogue. The line was innocuous, a character asking for a cup of tea. But the sponsor sold coffee, not tea, and the company feared that showing someone drinking tea on screen might hurt their coffee sales. The line was cut, and the episode aired without it. But Serling learned once again that creative freedom had a price tag attached. The budgetary pressures on the show were even more damaging than the sponsor notes. During the second season, CBS executives grew furious over rising production costs and demanded that the crew find ways to spend less money on each episode. The solution they imposed was brutal. They forced the production team to film 6 episodes entirely on cheap, primitive videotape, instead of the high-quality 35mm film stock that gave the show its distinctive cinematic look. Each of these episodes was shot using a multi-camera videotape setup that lacked the depth of field and visual richness of film. The result was flat and cheap, resembling a daytime soap opera rather than a cutting-edge science fiction series. The creative team was deeply upset by the results, and viewers noticed the difference immediately. The experiment was abandoned after those 6 episodes, but the footage had already been captured and broadcast, and those episodes remain visually jarring when watched alongside the rest of the series. The grueling production schedule required delivering up to 36 episodes per season, a workload that would break most writing staffs. Rod Serling did not have a writing staff, at least not in the modern sense. He single-handedly wrote 92 of the 156 episodes that aired during the show's original run. To keep up with the massive workload, he used a dictaphone machine and spent 12 to 14 hours a day speaking scripts into it while constantly smoking. He used this habit to calm himself and stay focused through the long hours. The habit would eventually cost him his life, but in the early 1960s, it was simply part of how he managed to keep working. The dictaphone allowed him to work faster than writing by hand or typing, but it also meant that his scripts were often rough, requiring extensive revisions before they were ready for production. The exhaustion was visible in his face, and friends who saw him during those years worried that he was working himself to death. The pressures of the schedule also created friction between Serling and other writers who contributed to the show. Renowned genre author Ray Bradbury was a close friend of Serling's, and Bradbury contributed the script for an episode called I Sing the Body Electric, which aired during the 3rd season. The collaboration should have been a celebration of 2 great minds working together. Instead, their friendship was permanently shattered when Bradbury publicly accused Serling of plagiarizing his concept for a different episode, a nostalgic piece called Walking Distance. Bradbury claimed that Serling had stolen ideas from his personal stories without giving him proper credit, and the accusation cut deep because it came from someone Serling considered a friend and peer. The feud between them lasted for a long time, a bitter reminder that even the closest creative relationships can be destroyed by disputes over ownership and attribution. The plagiarism accusations did not stop with Bradbury. Cayuga Productions and CBS faced a high-profile, multi-thousand-dollar lawsuit over copyright infringement during the 3rd season, a case that the studio worked hard to keep out of the newspapers. Writer George Clayton Johnson had based his script for an episode called Kick the Can on a short story that he believed was his own original creation. However, a rival author filed a formal lawsuit claiming that the central premise of the episode, elderly people reverting to childhood by playing children's games, was directly stolen from a pre-existing published work. The evidence was troubling enough that the studio chose to settle the matter quietly rather than risk a public trial. The settlement amount was never disclosed, but the fact of the settlement suggested that the rival author's claims had merit. These battles with sponsors, budgets, and plagiarism claims were exhausting, but they were not the only problems that plagued the production of The Twilight Zone. Behind the scenes, technical blunders and production slip-ups occurred with alarming frequency, and the producers tried very hard to hide the evidence from the audience. For decades, those mistakes were hidden by the low quality of old television sets. But now that the episodes have been remastered in high definition, the mistakes are impossible to miss. Production mistakes. Hiding in plain sight. One of the most famous episodes of the entire series is called To Serve Man, which first aired in 1962. The story features 9-foot-tall aliens called Canamites, who come to Earth promising peace and prosperity. The twist ending, which still shocks first-time viewers, is that the aliens are not here to help, but to eat people. The episode is brilliant, but the production has serious problems. The actors playing the Canamites wore oversized prosthetic platform shoes and tight costumes that made it almost impossible for them to move normally. They wobbled when they walked, and they had trouble turning around. The crew did their best to hide these problems with careful camera angles, but the remastered versions have exposed something even more embarrassing. In the scene where a Canamite walks away from a podium inside the United Nations building, leaving behind a book that contains the alien language, the episode requires the book to float up off the podium by itself. In 1962, when most people watched television on small black-and-white screens with fuzzy reception, the trick worked perfectly. But high-definition and 4K remasters have completely exposed the setup. The physical support wires attached to the book to lift it are clearly visible. Even worse, the shadows of crew members ducking behind the set partitions can be seen moving in the background. What looked like magic 60 years ago now looks like exactly what it was: a cheap special effect performed by people who did not have enough time or money to do it right. Another episode called A Thing About Machines from 1960 features a scene where a grumpy old writer named Bartlett Finchley is chased down his own driveway by a car with no driver. The car moves on its own, or at least it is supposed to. To pull off the illusion of an autonomous vehicle, the production crew hired a stunt driver and told him to wear a custom-made canvas suit that matched the white canvas interior of the convertible top. The driver then ducked low beneath the dashboard, hoping that the suit would blend in with the car's interior and make him invisible to the camera. For most of the scene, the trick works well enough. But in the remastered edition, there is a moment when the car turns sharply toward the camera and the illusion falls apart completely. The stunt driver's head, his hands on the steering wheel, and even the movements of his arms are completely visible through the front windshield glass. The audience is not watching a driverless car. They are watching a grown man in a canvas suit, trying very hard not to be seen. Perhaps the most beloved episode of the entire series is Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which first aired in 1963. The episode starred William Shatner as a passenger who sees a monster on the wing of his airplane. Director Richard Donner, who would later become famous for directing the first Superman movie, hated the physical design of the gremlin creature costume. He said it looked like a cheap fur teddy bear, not a frightening monster from another dimension. To hide the problems with the costume, Donner ordered the camera operators to use tight framing, heavy shadows, and artificial rain machines to obscure the low-budget look of the suit. The rain was especially important because wet fur looks darker and less obviously fake than dry fur. For most of the episode, Donner's tricks work. But during a rapid pan across the wing, there is a moment when the creature turns its back to face the airplane window. In that split second, the harsh studio lighting hits the costume directly, and the illusion shatters. A thick, metallic zipper running down the center of the actor's back is completely visible to anyone who looks closely. The terrifying gremlin from another world is wearing a costume that zips up, and the zipper is right there on screen for everyone to see. Another episode called Mr. Dingle the Strong from 1961 features a scene where a weak vacuum cleaner salesman is given superhuman strength by aliens. To demonstrate his new powers, he lifts a massive, heavy boulder over his head. The prop boulder was carved out of lightweight papier-mâché and styrofoam, which made it easy for the actor to lift, but also made it look fake. Because the boulder was too light to sit naturally on the ground, the crew had to rig a pulley system to keep it in place between takes. They pushed a metal pole through the back of the set wall and attached it to the boulder so that someone off camera could push the boulder upward when the actor pretended to lift it. In modern high-definition viewings, the trick is painfully obvious. As actor Burgess Meredith lifts the boulder, the back wall of the set noticeably flexes inward from the pressure of the pole. Through the gap in the artificial scenery, the black support rod pushing the prop upward can be seen moving in plain sight. The audience is supposed to believe that a man is lifting a boulder through sheer strength. What they are actually seeing is a stagehand shoving a pole through a fake wall. These production mistakes are funny and interesting, but they are not the most shocking thing that happened behind the scenes of The Twilight Zone. One episode was so disturbing that the network immediately banned it entirely. The producers tried to make sure no one would ever see it again. The most controversial Twilight Zone episode. The controversial episode producers tried to hide is called The Encounter, and it holds a record that no other installment of The Twilight Zone can claim. When it first aired on May 1, 1964, it was the 151st episode of the series. After that single broadcast, CBS locked the master tapes in their vaults and refused to let anyone watch the episode again. For 52 years, The Encounter was completely excluded from all standard syndication packages, holiday marathons, and daytime reruns. It did not return to American television until 2016, when the Sci-Fi Channel aired it as part of their annual New Year's marathon. For more than half a century, the network acted as if this episode had never existed. The reason for the ban was not a production mistake or a technical error. It was the content of the story itself. The episode centers on two men alone in an attic. A young Japanese-American gardener named Arthur Takamori, played by George Takei, and an unstable American World War II veteran named Fenton, played by Neville Brand. The two men meet by accident when Takamori comes looking for work. Fenton invites him up for a drink, and what starts as an awkward conversation slowly turns into something much darker. The breaking point for the public came when Takamori confesses something shocking. He admits that his father, who lived in Hawaii and worked for the Navy, was actually a traitor. According to the episode, his father used a lantern to signal Japanese soldiers during the attack on Pearl Harbor, showing them exactly where to carry out their attacks. The confession is presented as the character's deepest shame, the family secret that has haunted him his entire life. Here is the problem. That plot point was a complete fabrication. There is no evidence that any Japanese American living in Hawaii helped the Japanese military during the attack on Pearl Harbor. The FBI investigated thoroughly after the attack and found zero proof of sabotage or signaling. The episode took a racist conspiracy theory, one that had been used to justify the forced internment of over 120,000 innocent Japanese Americans during World War II, and presented it as if it were true. The episode effectively validated the very propaganda that had put George Takei and his family behind barbed wire fences. The casting of George Takei made the situation even more painful. Takei was not just an actor playing a role. He and his family were actual prisoners inside Japanese-American internment camps during the war. They were sent first to Camp Rover in Arkansas and later to Camp Tule Lake in California, simply because of their ancestry. There was no trial, no evidence, and no charge. They were locked up because the government decided that they could not be trusted. And here was Takei, years later, being asked to deliver lines that apologized for his character's treacherous father. Lines that suggested the internment might have been justified. Takei has since expressed deep regret over taking the role, noting that the script severely damaged the historical truth of his community's loyalty to the United States. He has also joked, with a hint of bitterness, that the ban cost him his residuals. The episode did not just offend Japanese-American viewers. It also angered veterans organizations and corporate sponsors. The character of Fenton, played by Neville Brand, delivers a monologue in the hot attic where he admits to something horrific. Neville Brand, who was ironically a highly decorated real-life World War II combat veteran himself, confesses that he committed a war crime against a Japanese soldier who was actively trying to surrender. He then stole the dead man's katana as an unauthorized trophy. The killing of a surrendering soldier is a war crime, and having a protagonist admit to one on national television was too much for CBS's sponsors, who were already nervous about the escalating conflict in Vietnam. The episode also includes a dangerous stunt that George Takei performed himself. In the climax, the katana sword mysteriously drives Fenton to attack, leading to his death. Afterward, Takamori grabs the sword and hurls himself out of the attic window. Director Robert Butler used a tightly cropped camera frame to hide the stunt setup. Takei performed the high-altitude fall himself, diving out of the window frame onto a stack of cardboard boxes and mattresses positioned on the studio floor, just below the camera's sight line. One wrong move, and he could have missed the boxes entirely. The episode ends with Takamori on the ground outside, sword in hand, shouting triumphantly as the camera fades to black. For Japanese-American advocacy groups, that scream was the final insult. It played into every ugly stereotype about Japanese people that had circulated during the war. The episode that might have been an honest exploration of racism and war trauma instead became an example of the very thing it claimed to criticize. Rod Serling did not write this episode. The teleplay came from a writer named Martin Goldsmith, and Serling's involvement was limited to the opening and closing narration. But Serling was the face of the show, and he took the heat when the protests rolled in. His opening narration set the stage, describing two ancient opponents moving into position for a battle in an attic crammed with ghosts from the past. But no amount of poetic language could save the episode from its own historical inaccuracies. For 52 years, the encounter existed in a strange limbo. It was not destroyed, but it was not shown. Fans who wanted to see it had to track down bootleg copies or wait for the DVD releases, which were not subject to the same restrictions as broadcast television. The episode remained available on home video, but it never appeared on the annual marathons that introduced new generations to the Twilight Zone. It was the show's dirty secret, the episode that everyone had heard about but almost no one had actually seen. When Sci-Fi finally aired the episode in 2016, the network did so with a content warning. The episode is still uncomfortable to watch, not because it is poorly made, but because its central lie has aged so badly. The performances by Neville and Takei are excellent. The tension is real. But the moment when Takamori confesses that his father was a traitor lands like a punch to the gut. Not because it is good drama, but because it is a lie that caused real harm to real people. George Takei, now an icon of both acting and activism, has made peace with his participation in the episode, but he has never stopped wishing that the script had been different. The Twilight Zone was a show about fear, prejudice, and the darkness that lives inside ordinary people. Some of its best episodes hold up as timeless warnings about the dangers of hatred and ignorance. But The Encounter is not one of those episodes. It is a warning of a different kind, a reminder that even the most well-intentioned stories can get things terribly wrong when they forget to check their facts against history. Have you seen this controversial episode? Tell us in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.